Hey everyone, this is Dr. Casey Johnson. Thank you so much for taking time to listen to the Unlock Wellness podcast. I know you're going to love today's episode with Erik Van Der Lee. Erik is doing some amazing work, so I'm excited to have him on to share a story with you guys. If you've been loving the Unlock Wellness podcast, be sure to jump onto iTunes, subscribe, and write a review. It really helps me out a lot, and I really appreciate all of the feedback and support. The Unlock Wellness podcast is now on patreon.com. Patreon is an amazing site that allows you to support your favorite podcasts. So whether it's $1 per month or 10 or 20, it's an amazing way to help support the Unlock Wellness podcast. If you're unable to support at this time, I still love you. The podcast will always be free, but the podcast has been growing a lot, and using Patreon will help me slowly improve recording equipment so I can get you guys the best sound quality possible, as well as help decrease the need to use sponsored ads in the episode. I'm definitely not against sponsorships by any means, but I respect your time as listeners, and I really don't want to have to overload the podcast with a bunch of ads. So if you do want to support using Patreon, all you have to do is go to patreon.com/Dr. Casey Johnson. There's even fun incentives for supporting, like shirts and stickers, so be sure to check it out. Also, be sure to follow me on social media to keep up with the latest podcast episodes. The best way to connect with me is on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. My username across the board is at Dr. Casey Johnson. That's DrKaseyJohnson. You can also check out my website at drcaseyjohnson.com. It has all of the past podcast episodes and more information about each guest under the Listen tab. While you're on my site, also be sure to check out the Shop tab, where you can check out my first book of my Healthy Children's Book series and learn about the Unlock Wellness Project, which supplies a wellness bag to a child in need for each book purchased. Thank you again for listening. I hope this episode leaves you feeling inspired to start making positive changes to your health. Now it's time for today's episode. I hope you love my conversation with Erik Van Der Lee. Welcome to the Unlock Wellness podcast. I'm Dr. Casey and excited for today's guest. I'm here with Erik Van Der Lee, and Erik is a plant-based professional fighter and is just doing so much positive work. So I'm excited to have him on to share a story with you guys. Erik, thank you so much for taking time to come on. I'm excited to have you.
Hi, Dr. Casey. I'm really happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and like you were saying before we started, we're just going to jump into your backstory. So why don't you walk everybody through where you're from and then what your health and wellness look like at a younger age, and really just how that's progressed over time to where you are right now.
Sure thing. So my name's Erik Van Der Lee. Like Dr. Casey said, I'm a professional fighter, and I'm plant-based, and I grew up in the Netherlands. I moved to California when I was 13 for my parents' work. And growing up, my diet was pretty standard, I guess you could say, like just normal. My mom would make some proteins, usually meat, and then some veggies and some carbs, and that's kind of the standard meal, I suppose. So I started training out here in Orange County when I was 15, and I met a guy named James Wilks, who was the owner of the gym, and he was a UFC fighter, and he was plant-based. And so spending time with him and just asking him questions about his diet kind of enabled me to start replicating that. And that's what I did. And I started off with breakfast. I would have my oats like he did. And then from there on, I would keep going towards a more plant-based lifestyle. And from then on, it's kind of taken on its own life, its own course. And it's just part of my diet now. So that's pretty much, I don't eat any animal products anymore.
That's cool. I mean, that's cool that you had a mentor that was already doing that, and somebody that I'm sure you looked up to a lot, because otherwise I'm sure that would have been a little harder, because there's just so much misinformation out there. And especially as a male athlete, there's also a lot of like stereotypical things you hear with going plant-based, right? People are worried about, protein and being that active,
Mm-hmm.
which obviously both you and I know that that's not an issue. But that's really cool that you had a mentor to really help pave the way for that. I mean, did you ever have any like doubts about switching, or you just fully trusted because he was doing it?
So I trusted because he was doing it, but I felt like since I was still so young and financially dependent on other people, I kind of just ate what I could get, to a certain degree. And but it definitely was great to have a role model like that, someone to help guide me and someone that you can ask questions to. That's really
Right.
important. Yeah.
It is. What were some of the biggest questions you had when you were first starting out?
Well, when I first started out, people were kind of making fun of me because I would always ask, his name was James Wilks, and I would always ask him, James, what'd you have for breakfast? And that every morning I would ask it, and people started making fun of me a little bit, called me Erik Breakfast Van Der Lee, and yeah, but it definitely helped me, because you start off with the I don't know, he taught me to eat raw oats, sometimes even the overnight oats, and you add the berries and flax seeds and chia seeds. And I don't know, the way it made me feel in the morning kind of reflected on my whole day. And so from there on, it was kind of obvious to me that was the way to go, instead of, eating eggs in the morning and kind of feeling sluggish. And that definitely helped me out.
That's cool. I mean, that's cool. You were feeling the physical benefits of it right away. Was there other fighters within like your, workout circle that was also doing that because James was doing it as well?
Right. Yes, there was actually. And what's funny is this actually helped me transition the most because there was a dude that fought under James, and he was also an instructor, and I also looked up to him. His name was Mark Vorges. And he had a company called A Gorgeous Mix, and so he would do vegan meal prep and then have the meals delivered to all around the county. And so I started working for him. I started helping in the kitchen, and that's when I really started to learn exactly what it takes to be plant-based, what you need, and kind of get into the finer details of a balanced, a truly balanced diet.
Right. And I mean, yeah, because it gave you just those tools to feel confident to make different kinds of meals, even though obviously you can make meals super basic, right? It doesn't take a lot to really have a really full, diverse plant-based diet. Like it's pretty easy once you get down to like just the basics of it. But you got to be in the kitchen and be like, I can do this and that. And just, I'm sure that makes you feel better because you don't feel like you're just stuck with just a salad or things that seem really boring, which I think most people think that's what being vegan is, just just that plain like iceberg salad, nothing else, right?
Right. And I think the beauty of that was too that I'm not just cooking for myself and making sure that I'm willing to eat it, but you have to meet a certain standard because there's people paying for this stuff, right? So then, yeah, I really had to step my game up and make sure everything's not only presentable but also tastes really good, That's
awesome. So I'm guessing your family was pretty supportive of it then because you started at a pretty young age. So I'm sure they had to be somewhat on board with it.
Yeah, so my mom is definitely on board. My mom's always been on board, and she would go vegetarian herself when she would cook for us. Now I live with my girlfriend, and she helps me out too. She's also plant-based. So yeah, people are definitely supportive, and sometimes I know we deal with people not being like that, like my dad, for example. He's not opposed to it, but he still eats meat. And I don't know, at the end of the day, people are going to make their own decisions, and that's okay.
Right. No, and that is super important. I mean, it's just understanding everybody's at a different place with it. And like, you don't know where those people are going to be a year from now, 2 years from now, because most people think that they'll never be vegan. I mean, I'm pretty sure most vegans have probably said, I'll never be vegan at some point in their life, right? So It's just understanding. It's just part of the process, just learning, and then you understand, and then people are going to start asking you questions, and it's just part of the process.
Right. And I feel like the older you get, the more you get stuck in your ways usually. You've just been, if you're over 40 and you've been eating a certain way for 40 years, like that's a long time, and it is what it is at that point. Sometimes, unless people have a very open mind, but that's just kind of the pattern that I see. People kind of get stuck in their ways.
Did you have any struggles with it at all, or did it come pretty easily because you had the support and then you did learn how to really prepare some meals shortly after?
I never really struggled. I mean, sometimes, when you order a bean and cheese or a bean and rice burrito with no cheese and you still get the cheese, I think maybe a year ago, like, if they get the order wrong, I wouldn't have cared too much maybe 2 years ago, but now I'm really picky, I'm really starting to, yeah, I'll go back. I had to do this the other day. That's why I mentioned it.
Yeah, no, I know that is, I mean, the same thing. Like if something comes back with cheese, like I'm not afraid to be like, oh, I wanted this without cheese. And it's not like they care. I think people get, I think I was thinking about this yesterday. So I'm kind of glad you brought it up because it's like, I think people think it's a hassle to order something kind of special from a restaurant because you can eat vegan or plant-based basically anywhere that you go, even if there's nothing vegan on the menu. Like every item has sides, and like if you see a bunch of sides that you can put together, like I can make a taco salad at literally any restaurant known to man, like because
That's
you just
awesome.
mix different sides. Or if like avocado is not listed but it's listed on something else, you can just be like, hey, can you add avocado? Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I think people are afraid of just being different or being difficult with like a waiter, but honestly, they no, like the workers like never care as long as you're nice. They're more worried that you're being friendly and nice than you ordering something difficult. Like you
Absolutely.
know what I mean? They want their they want tables that they wait on to be nice and like friendly and make them laugh. They don't care if you ask for no cheese. It's just just getting over. I think that really help a lot of people.
Yeah, I think so too. That's like the experienced vegan, the one that knows how to get a vegan meal at any restaurant.
I feel like a professional now because it's not as hard as you think. The sides you can mix and match different sides, but
Absolutely.
yeah. So that I mean that's amazing though that you had the support and the resources. Were there any resources that helped you specifically along the way besides your coaches, like whether it be a book or a documentary or anything like that?
Yeah, so that's interesting that you mentioned that. It kind of does come back to my coach, James. So he fought in the UFC, but after his fighting career was over, he decided to make a documentary. And so that documentary just premiered at Sundance Film Festival. And they got some pretty big people on there. Like there's this vegan strongman, Patrick Baboumian, who set the world record yoke lift, and he's heavily involved in the movie, as well as James Cameron is the co-producer.
That's
And
cool.
yeah, so the movie's yet to be published, but I definitely researched the guys that were in there. And in college, I would often do a lot of presentations on James and Patrick, and just kind of introduce that plant-based lifestyle through school. Share it with my other students in the class, and yeah, it was good.
That's cool. And I've seen a lot, actually a lot of publicity about that documentary. That's cool. I didn't realize that's who was in that documentary. I mean, he's like the main person in there, right?
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
the guy that follows it. Yeah, so the movie's called the Game Changers,
Yep.
and yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing it.
That's amazing. I mean, obviously anything that James Cameron puts out isn't going to be overlooked, which is
Right.
really amazing because um yeah, I mean, he's an amazing person. I don't think he's been on Rich Roll. His wife's been on there.
Okay.
And she's amazing. I know they do a lot of positive work together. But yeah, I can't wait to see it. Do you know right off when it's coming out?
I think right now they're looking for someone to publish it.
Okay.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
they're. I don't. That's all I really know.
Yeah, no, I can't wait to see it. But yeah, no, so Erik, what got you into fighting in the first place? Like did you grow up just doing that or were you doing other sports and just somehow fell into that?
Right. So I did a little bit of judo in the Netherlands when I was a kid. Um, and then I moved out here and I started doing some other stuff. And I started playing guitar more and being a little bit more on the creative side, I suppose. I like drawing and reading and writing. But when I was 15 here, a friend of mine, he actually had like a free week pass to James's gym. And he would tell me, "Man, we got to try this out. They have a cage there." And for some reason, that's what got me. He's like, "They have a cage," and I was like, "Yes, let's do it." So I went for a free week, and then I think he came with me once or twice, and I just kind of fell in love with the place. I was kind of a troublemaker at a time, and I don't know, age 13 to 15, I feel like I was just kind of lost as an individual, switching continents and not really knowing anyone, and getting involved with the wrong crowd and experimenting with things I probably shouldn't have, and I just didn't have the right role models anymore. And when I entered that gym, I just saw a lot of people that I wanted to be like, and from then on, that kind of took on its own life. When I stepped into that gym, I had dreadlocks. I was skinny. I had no form, nothing. And it just really set me straight, provided me with the discipline I needed and the growth that I needed, and the role models. Yeah, the role models are very key, right? Because you are who you hang out with, right?
Yep. Yeah. No, that's cool. And I mean, I'm sure it gave you a lot of humility too, because I mean, you walk into a place like that, you're not the tough guy anymore, right? Like you have none of the skills that these guys have, and they could take you down pretty easily. So,
Right.
yeah, that's amazing. Like, what was the hardest part about just that whole process of training to be a fighter?
Well, at first, I didn't realize I was training to be a fighter at all. I was just kind of doing it like everyone else in the gym. I mean, the toughest part is you're getting beat up constantly, and then you have to show up the next day, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, that's what I love about it. You know, right now I'm training at a straight boxing gym, and I'm an MMA fighter, so straight boxing is totally different. And I'm getting beat up in there, and but I love it, because I come back the next day and say, let's do it again, and I'll just keep trying. And at the end of the day, I feel you can compare yourself to other people, but if I'm better than the person I was yesterday, then that's what I'm truly looking for. And that's what represents true improvement and success to me.
Yeah. And I mean, just the amount that you grow as a person, like you were saying, and just that strong mindset that you have to develop to get beat up and show up the next day, attempt to be at your best the next day, because if you don't, you're going to get beat up even worse than you did before. So it's just
Right.
just that mentality, I think, goes into like all aspects of your life.
Right. That's very true.
Yeah. And so, I mean, how long were you actually working out before you started to implement the plant-based diet? Because you said you walked in, you had your dreads, you were skinny. Like, how long did it take to really I guess, flip your mindset to where you took it more seriously? You were wanting to improve in those ways?
So I feel like after the first year, I definitely started to ask a lot of questions and started to implement it. And then from there, I would dabble into the plant-based diet here and there. But within maybe within 3 years, I was pretty much completely plant-based.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
Yeah,
So you were about what age whenever, I guess, you were fully there?
maybe 18. And then I might have messed up maybe once or twice from there, but pretty steady and consistent since I was 18.
Nice. And how old are you now?
I'm 23.
Gotcha. How does it work from going from you're working out, you're improving? When do you decide that you can take it to the next level? Did you beat somebody that was really good and you're like, oh man, I can do this? Or did he just kind of throw you into a match? Or how did that whole process look?
Right. So usually it's the coach that'll tell you when you're ready. I don't remember a specific instance that made my coach feel that way, but I think I was training about 2 years, and that's when I had my first fight.
Gotcha. How did that go?
I lost my first one.
Yeah, badly,
Yeah.
or was it close?
It was pretty back and forth, but I got choked the last 3 seconds of the last round, so that was a pretty tough loss for me. What's interesting was I got an opportunity to fight again maybe 2-3 weeks after that, and I just jumped on the opportunity, and that one was in Vegas. And yeah, we drove out. I drove out there with my coach, and I won all 3 rounds and beat the guy, and then I was okay again. It's kind of like you have this chip on your shoulder until you win your next fight.
Yeah, and that's it's kind of. I mean, it's interesting that you were saying you trained for 2 years before you had your first fight. I think. I mean, I think that's. Amazing. Obviously, you have to be prepared, but most people don't have that kind of patience to put in the work day in, day out, unless I mean, you have to really love what you're doing and have that mindset that you're going to do what it takes, because 2 years without any kind of competition, if you're a very competitive person, I'm sure that can be really hard, just that waiting game.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I will say that since it's MMA, like you're always able to do like jiu-jitsu tournaments. So I think I had done maybe 2 or 3 jiu-jitsu tournaments before I did the MMA fight, which was nice. Kind of gets the jitters out a little bit, even though it doesn't quite compare to the intensity of a fight. But
Yeah. Do you prefer MMA over all of the different forms of fighting that you've done so far?
yeah, absolutely. I feel that I'm decent at boxing, decent at kickboxing, but I feel that when I blend everything together with the wrestling and jiu-jitsu, that's who I am. And back in the day, they didn't have gyms where they would train all disciplines under one roof. But since I'm kind of young, I was lucky enough to train under gyms that do provide everything. And so I've really been bred as a mixed martial artist as opposed to a straight boxer, straight kickboxer, straight jiu-jitsu guy.
Gotcha. Is it harder? Like, have you talked to like friends, is it harder to go from one of them to, like, if you were a boxer and you go to MMA, is that more difficult? Because I could see where it would be really hard if you went from MMA to boxing, because now you have to be super structured, that there's a lot more rules, obviously. Like, do you feel like when you talk to fighters that maybe have done more than one, like it's easier to go to MMA after you've done that, because you do have you can do more things, or you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, I understand. I feel personally, because MMA includes, wrestling, jiu-jitsu, boxing, kickboxing mostly, that if a boxer were to transition to MMA, he would have to learn all of that. He would have a good boxing base, but he would have to learn how to wrestle. He would have to learn jiu-jitsu. He would have to learn how to kick. And if an MMA guy switches to boxing, all he really has to do, and this is in theory, right? All he really has to do is be proficient in boxing.
I guess it's like the Mayweather stuff that basically.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I thought McGregor did really well in that fight, actually.
Yeah, no, he did, and that's super interesting though. Yeah, I mean, do you think you're gonna ever switch over to? I mean, do you feel like you're gonna switch over to boxing since you're doing it more, or as you get older, or like just because it's a lot of stress on your body? So do you feel like you can sustain it for a long period of time?
Right. So I'm a professional MMA fighter. So I have that licensing, right? And the licensing goes through the state of California. So if I were to fight kickboxing or boxing, it would have to be professional match as well. If I were to do that, I would really want to invest the time into that particular martial art or sport. So it's definitely not off the table, but I would just have to invest in it, and the right opportunity would have to come around. But I'm not opposed to it by any means. I feel like fighting's fighting, and it's all a mental game. And I definitely like to do a boxing and kickboxing match. Absolutely.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. And I know you were talking about how it took you a few years to get to that fully plant-based spot. So I'm sure you probably noticed some of the contrasts to where, like, if you weren't eating plant-based first, you were. Like, did you ever notice any major differences with like how fast you recovered, or just your agility and focus and clarity? Like, did you notice it a lot once you started to eat fully plant-based, or just where you did it so gradually? Do you feel like it just all stayed like it was just like that all the time?
I definitely feel less sluggish. I remember when I used to eat meat, it would kind of like weigh me down. I just feel like it's a way cleaner source of energy. And yeah, that's seriously how I feel about it. And also, I'm helping the environment. I'm not gonna lie and say I'm doing it for the environment or strictly for animals. I love both, but at the end of the day, I want to be the best I can be in the sport that I'm doing. And I know that's kind of selfish, but at the same time, if I'm helping the environment while I'm being selfish, I think that's okay, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I talk to so many people, and it's really cool because everybody has, I feel like 99% of the people that I talk to that come on the podcast that have gone vegan or plant-based, it's interesting because they all have their reasons why, obviously, but almost every time it's a very distinct reason usually. It's not because they want to do all of those things, but eventually they get to all of those things. Like people will come on, like you, like they're doing it for, for their sport or for just to physically be healthier. And then they realize all the other things and they're like, man, it's really cool because I also get to improve the environment. And, it's also better for just to help in factory farming and to help animals and all of those
ethical
things,
reasons, yeah.
ethical reasons. Yeah. And, so it's eventually they get to all of those places, but typically it's not, people don't just go vegan because it's like, oh, I can do this, 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 this. It's usually one major factor. And then the other stuff they learn about as they go. And then it's just like nothing bad will happen from what will come from doing it. It's just all positive things come from it, which is pretty cool.
Absolutely. And I feel like that's really the beauty of it.
Yeah, it's amazing. So that's cool though, that you've been more aware of the ethical side of it and the environmental side of it. I'm sure you've watched movies like Cowspiracy and stuff like that.
Yes. Yeah. I've seen a couple of documentaries on Netflix regarding the plant-based thing. There's a couple other ones that I watched. I can't think of the name right now. But is the Cowspiracy your favorite?
Yeah, I think it's up there. It's up there. There's so many so good. But that one kind of blew my mind though, just as far as like the environmental aspect of it, because it was so much stuff that I didn't know. Yeah, I loved that one. I think that was amazing.
I really enjoyed Forks Over Knives, and I also read. Well, I didn't read the whole thing yet. I'm actually reading the China Study right now, which I really like. Have you heard of that one?
Yep, I have it. I have the audiobook actually.
Excellent. Yeah,
audiobooks make it nice. That's awesome though. So are you currently training for a fight, or do you have one coming up soon?
So my manager actually asked me yesterday to see if I could fight July 7th, but I will not be able to. My coach is going to be out of town, and my second cornerman is actually permanently moving out of the state. So right now our gym is in kind of a transitional period. So we're going to see, but hopefully I can fight by the end of July or, August somewhere.
Awesome. Yeah, that's awesome. And is there anything else happening in the future that you just want to share with people, where people can just be keeping an eye out for, or just continuing to train and just put positive content out there?
Yeah, I suppose that's what I'm going to be doing. Just continue doing my thing, and trying to leave a positive footprint behind me, and I feel like that's the most important thing in my life is I want to leave something good behind, I feel like at the end of the day, that's all we can really do.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you feel like some younger fighters that are coming up are coming to you for answers to those kind of questions too? Because I feel like you've been at that gym around that same circle for so long, like you have a lot of knowledge to give to these like up and coming younger fighters as well.
Right. Well, I would definitely tell those people to definitely do their research. Make sure you don't just go vegan and eat a bunch of chips and soda, Make sure you do your research and find out what a balanced meal really is, where to find your protein sources. And I highly recommend to supplement creatine. Creatine's helped out my energy levels a lot.
No, that's cool. Do you what do you have a certain brand that you like to use?
Not in particular. I like the MRM brand. MRM has good creatine. I just noticed my energy levels are better on it, much higher energy levels, and even after training, I'll come home and vacuum and do the dishes. That's always good, right?
So even if your husband is not an athlete or a boxer, as long as you give him some creatine and he'll do the dishes. I think that's what Eric's trying to do. Just kidding.
Absolutely.
No, that's awesome. But So Eric, what is the best way for people to follow you on social media? That way they can just keep up with everything that you're doing.
Okay, the best way to follow me on social media would be on Instagram, and I'm at van.der.leecious. Vanderleicious.
Love it. Awesome. And Eric, just closing question that I ask every guest. But if you just had one piece of advice for the audience, maybe it's something that's been your biggest takeaway through your journey so far. But if you just had one piece of advice to give, what would it be?
One piece of advice I would give everyone, if I could, is to definitely make your own decisions, make your own choices, and don't simply follow societal norms. At the end of the day, we're all our own person, and our actions are going to reflect on that. So definitely do you. That's the most important thing. Just do you. Ignore societal norms and find out what the best path for you is.
Love it. That's perfect, Erik. And hey, Erik, just thank you so much for taking time to come on. I loved having you and just can't wait to continue to follow your journey with your fights and just everything that you're doing. So just thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Casey. The feeling's definitely mutual. I really appreciate you having me. And yeah, can't wait to do this again. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys so much for listening to today's episode. I hope you loved my conversation with Erik. He's doing so much positive work, so be sure to give him a follow on social media to keep up with everything that he's been working on. You can find his social media links that we talked about in the episode in the show notes, but you can also find them on my website as well at drcaseyjohnson.com. That's drkaseyjohnson.com. Click on the Listen tab. Then from there, you'll be able to see all of the past guests that have come on the Unlock Wellness podcast, read a little bit about each guest, and be able to click on their social media links, websites, all of that. So all of Erik's information can be found on my site as well. If you guys loved today's episode with Erik, be sure to jump onto iTunes, subscribe, and write a review. It really helps me out a lot, and I really appreciate all of the feedback and support. Also, be sure to check out patreon.com/Dr. Casey Johnson to learn how you can support the Unlock Wellness podcast. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to today's episode. I hope you loved it. I hope it inspires you. And most importantly, I hope you take action.